Your story is about to begin, but first, choose what you want to look like. By the way, I'll be going through all the options. There is slender, and then there's curvy for each skin type. Just FYI. Here's your hair options. Before we continue, please set your preferences. We'll go with both. You will be able to pursue romantic relationships with both male and female characters. I prefer romantic scenes to be explicit and detailed, subtle and less explicit because we're on YouTube. You have chosen a less explicit narrative style. Romantic scenes will rely more on subtext. Please set your gameplay preference. With hints enabled, icons will appear next to your choices to help you follow your desired path. Choices that affect romantic relationships will be marked with a heart icon. Sure, hints would be nice. Your preferences have been saved. They cannot be changed once the story begins. Under the cloak of darkness where the ancient forest merged with the sky, a village remained hidden. Its residents worshipped dead gods that were forever silent. According to the legends, they had died back when the sun had moved into the realm of eternity. For many years, there had been an endless night until the star was reborn once again. But the gods didn't rise back with it. The earth, deprived of divine protection, remained cursed. No one knew what the gods had done to receive such punishment, but since their death, the village had been surrounded by fog. From that moment on, anyone who stepped into the fog died in agony or disappeared. People had been living in the village for many years, not daring to leave their safe haven. But the silence of the Haze could be deceiving. And the Haze will take us. Episode 1, Awakening. The author was inspired by Slavic mythology, pagan beliefs, but the events of the story are fictional and do not claim to be accurate history. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I really dig that. I really do. Leda screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the morning twilight. She quickly closed her mouth and turned towards her sister's bed. Veria was fast asleep. She didn't know yet that Leda was trembling, still in the grips of her nightmare. The choice you're about to make will affect the plot. Some choices affect the plot slightly, others lead to big changes. This is not a good sign. I need to be careful today, but it was a bad dream. Omens don't scare me. I need to be careful today. Her bare feet touched the floorboards. Leda hovered over Veria, her twin, peering at her features, which seemed even more perfect when she was asleep. We don't resemble each other at all, but I can't figure out who I saw in my dream. There was something dark and ominous about it. She wanted to wash her face to push away that persistent feeling of dread. Rays of sun barely filtered through the thin gap between the curtains. They were trying to dispel the darkness that surrounded their beds, but the day was not yet at its peak, still helpless before the shadows. For some reason, thinking about that worried Leda. She pulled back the curtains and opened the window. It was the first day of the vernal equinox. That night, they were going to gather to say goodbye to winter and welcome spring. But that wasn't why Leda's heart hammered against her chest. and her soul was restless, sick with worry. Veria and Leda had been born on that day 18 years earlier. They were stepping into adulthood. Was their life going to change? Veria groaned, pulling the covers over her head. Time to get up if you want to have a blessed day. You'll sleep away all of your luck. The gods won't judge me. I don't feel, well... That's the mead talking. Leda put on her clothes and tidied her hair. Veria peeked out from underneath the covers. Are you going out again? Yes, at least I'll make myself useful. Her smile was sad, but Veria was too sleepy to notice and too careless to understand. Their mother was already feeding the chickens. Leda was always up early, but she couldn't keep up with her parents. Her shepherd's staff was in the corner, as usual. Hannah, their elder sister, was sitting in the hall. Hannah was born at noon. It quickly became clear that something was different with her. She wasn't crying. Exactly 1 year after Veria was born, but there was another baby in their mother's womb. Their mother suffered for a long time and nearly died in the process. It was only in the morning that she finally gave birth, and so Veria's twin, Leda, was born. 19 years had passed, but Hannah still hadn't spoken a word. Hannah was neither happy nor sad. For days on end, she would sit in an armchair looking out the window. There she was now, making a doll without looking at her thin, crooked fingers. Some choices increase wolf, other compassion, and then determination. A compassionate character is attentive, obedient, and hardworking. She sympathizes with people and cares about their lives. A determined character does what she wants, regardless of what others think. She is curious and reckless. Leda, as a person who's been taking care of 2 special needs brothers for 20 plus years, greeted her. She touched Hannah's shoulder gently, so as not to startle her, and said with a smile, "Good morning." Hannah didn't even turn her head to look at her sister. Her hands stopped for a moment, but soon she continued winding the yarn around the hay, giving it the shape of a head. Each new loop twisted tighter and tighter around the poor doll's neck. The silence of the morning was interrupted by loud axe blows. Leda looked around the corner to see what her father was doing. There was a crunching sound. A splinter came flying at Leda, whirling up a cloud of sawdust. Leda managed to duck back behind the wall. Splinter missed her and fell to the ground. Good heavens! Are you all right? Her father wedged the axe into the tree stump and came closer. I'm fine. His eyes fell on the shepherd's staff. Where are you going? You can take leave the sheep today. I'll take care of them. He caressed her hair roughly but affectionately. Today you and Veria have entered the light of adulthood. I will be glad to celebrate this day among the flock. I'm done with the roof. I can fix the axe next, and the head may slip off the handle. Reagan's voice came from behind her. It was sharp as a blade and quick as a whip. Leda couldn't help but flinch, feeling the tip of that whip hit her shoulder blades. You're just in time. Leda's father turned her around. She tried to resist, although with not much enthusiasm. Dragon has prepared a gift. Dragon was the son of a village elder. He used to play with the twins as a child. Having grown up, he had begun helping their father around the house. Although he wasn't a carpenter but a blacksmith, his handiness always proved useful. He met Leda's eyes with cruel indifference. Has Veria woken up yet? No. Dragon wiped a few beads of sweat from his forehead. He took a rag and wiped his torso too, erasing the traces of his work. Leda stood still, reproachfully watching his mockingly slow movements. Her father didn't notice anything, smiling in anticipation. Dragon picked up a small bundle and handed it to her, almost shoving it in her hands. There you go. Leda was confused. Is this for Varea? It's for you. His eyes were already looking past her at the axe, which he couldn't wait to get started on. Leda clutched the bundle. She felt her cheeks flush and hated herself for it. She was afraid that Dragon would notice and think that his gift meant something to her. It was the first time he paid attention to her. Usually, he barely spared her a glance, never called her by her name, and if he said something, it was either in a mocking or indifferent tone. She wasn't sure which one was worse. If it wasn't for his warmth towards Varia and their parents, Leda would have thought that he was just a bad person. But Dragon was always willing to help their father around the house, and always smiled when he saw Varia. Leda had long been convinced that he was in love with her sister. And no wonder. Everyone loved her. Thank you. Leda touched the bundle, but Dragon's voice stopped her. Are you going to open it here? An emotion flashed across his face, usually as still as a carved block of ice. He smirked. There was an expectation in the smile, a hint of mockery, but was he laughing at? Leda wanted to throw away his gift as if it was a snake inside of it. I wouldn't be surprised if it's manure or something worse. No, I won't open his gift, not in front of him. He put the bundle into her string bag. His face became inscrutable again. He walked past her and picked up the axe. Leda's father patted her on the back. May the gods favor you today. May the earth yield to your footsteps, and may the sky pour its blessings on you. Thank you. He kissed her on the forehead and nodded, allowing her to leave. She eagerly left her house behind. Her feet stepped silently on the still frozen ground. That winter had been long and harsh, and nature was reluctant to awaken, or maybe something was holding it back. The village seemed empty and dead. The dry trees were shaking, their crooked branches rustling in the morning wind. The fog surrounded the village like a dense wall, stretching out its claws and instantly retreating, not daring to go any further. It was to her right, and Leda casually looked at it, out of habit checking if anyone would emerge from it. Haze or reality points. The Haze urges you to explore the unknown, disregarding the will of the dead gods. Reality shuns the cursed fog and seeks the protection of the gods. The Haze... This is a tough one. I'm gonna go with didn't scare her. She'd seen it since she could remember, and it had become a part of her life. Leda walked to the withered grass, wrapping her slender fingers around the staff. It took her a moment to realize that something was wrong. She felt cold, her heart tightened with fear, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. Her feet suddenly stopped by themselves. The shepherd's staff fell to the ground with a soft thud. Leda turned to face the fog. She didn't really know what made her do that. The biting wind tugged at the hem of her clothes. She couldn't tell if it was dragging her into the fog or steering her away. The air turned dense, heavy, and goosebumps crawled across her skin. The pale mist felt damp against her bare legs. She felt lightheaded. Leda was trying to see something, but the fog made every effort to hide the world that lurked on the other side. Once again, her body leaned forward as if controlled by someone else. She raised her hand, stretched out her fingers, and plunged them through the particles frozen in the spring air. Step back. Caught in the act, Leda jumped back, her heart pounded in her chest as she turned to the voice that had given her that order. Okay. The priest was standing still, several feet away from Leda, watching her. She tried to deal with her fear. He was the one whom the evil spirits shunned. He was the one performing rituals and sacrifices. He was the one laid of fear, for some reason. He studied her face intently, his eyes hidden behind the skull of a bull. A sacred animal protected him from the evil. His linen cape hung in tatters off his broad shoulders, almost bursting at the seams. He was not very close, but she still had to lift her head to look at him, since he was so tall. Gods be merciful. Let him pass by. Let him pass by. What were you trying to do? I don't know, I just touched it. The priest took a step forward, and she flinched, automatically taking a step back. He stopped. The priest took another step, but that time Leda didn't move. As he passed by her, she swallowed back a shudder and a scream, and any sign of fear, forcing herself to stand perfectly still. It was only then, when the figure of the priest had disappeared into the distance, that Leda allowed herself to breathe again. Snapping back to reality, she grabbed her staff and practically ran towards the pasture. It never occurred to me to touch the haze before. I don't know what came over me. And then I ran into one of the priests. This isn't good. She sat under a tree. The sheep were grazing in the field, chewing lazily on the dry grass. Clumsy, slow, Leda was bad at spinning yarn, dancing, and cooking. Whatever she tried her hand at, it came out wrong. All of her life, she'd been growing up in the shadows of Veria, a favorite of the gods. Her sister was good at everything she tried. Leda admired, jealous, didn't worry about it, wanted to be like her. Wanted to be like her. Maybe then she would have stopped feeling like a burden. When her mother accepted that Leda wasn't fit to help around the house, she was allowed to do what she preferred. She loved animals and was happy to graze sheep and tend to them. We'll be dancing tonight around the fire. One of the sheep turned at the sound of her voice and bleated something in response. I know. I don't want to offend the gods with my dancing. The sheep came closer, chewing vigorously. She ran her fingers through its wool, scratched its head, thinking. The animal closed its eyes contentedly, without stopping eating. I'm 18 now. What if someone comes to court me? She shook her head, tossing her hair over her shoulders. The idea of marriage terrified her. She was afraid that someone would take her heart away. She didn't want to give it to anyone. The sheep smelled the food in her string bag and nuzzled it. Shoo. Go back to the others. Later took out the bundle dragon had given her, but was in no hurry to open it. Did my father put him up to it? Or did he think it would be awkward to only give a gift to Veria? Hesitantly, she unwrapped the gift. A pendant. Interesting. There was a pendant in the bundle. It looked as if it had been grown by Makash's caring hands. It was green, just like Leda's eyes. Delighted, Leda ran her hand over the stone. Did he make it himself? Did he realize that he had chosen a shade to match the color of my eyes, or was it just an accident? She frowned, reproaching herself for being afraid of his gift. Dragon would never allow himself to insult the daughter of someone he respects. Of course he created a decent gift, even if he has no sympathy for me. She turned the pendant towards the sun. The stone sparkled, reflecting the light. It took her breath away. How beautiful. The pendant shimmered and blinded her for a moment, bringing back the memory of his sly smirk. But then why did he have such an expression? What was on his mind? She clutched the pendant in frustration, as if she had no right to it. Diamond choice, got it. What should I do with it? Keep the gift, but don't wear it, throw it away. Wear the pendant for the celebration. We'll wear it. Even though it's silly, we're paying $45 for it. Leda put it on and pressed it tightly against her chest. This is a gift, and now it's mine. The pendant has been added to your wardrobe. She relaxed again, staring thoughtfully at the flock. The reason she loved to herd sheep was the peace and silence that she always found sitting under the tree. As she picked a straw and put it between her teeth. Silence. Blessed silence. The rustling of leaves and the occasional bleeding, not a soul in sight. She slapped her knees decisively and stood up. I need to practice. Smoothing down her skirt, she stretched her arms wide and took a deep breath, and then she froze. It's not that hard. She took a step, jumped on the spot, spun around, and leaped high like a deer, lifting her legs. Her bare feet hid in the tall grass, her dress billowing from her sudden clumsy movements. For a moment, she thought she was doing well, but as soon as she turned around, her feet got tangled and she stumbled, almost hitting the tree. The sheep bleated in unison. She couldn't tell if it was mockery or support. I know. I'm a terrible dancer. Hello, stranger. Leda shuddered, catching a faint glimpse of a silhouette frozen on the horizon. Who's that? He didn't move. He just stood there and looked at her. And then he raised his hand and drew a circle in the air. You look like fun. Unconsciously, Leda touched her wrist and brushed her fingers over her birthmark. It was shaped like a circle. Hannah and Veria, with the same birthmark. Their mother said it was a blessing, protection from the gods. Leda... believed it with every part of her soul, didn't believe it. I don't know, we have no backstory for the birthmark. I'm gonna go with didn't believe it. The gods were dead. There was no one left to protect them. Her lips parted as if she wanted to ask a question, as if the man in rags could hear her, but the stranger turned around and wandered off into the forest. In their isolated village, there were legends that someone could be living in the dangerous forest, but the priests had never met anyone. Did Leda meet a forest ghost? One of the sheep had strayed away from the others. Leda had to push those troubling thoughts aside and get to work, but a premonition as dark as tar settled inside of her stomach. That small, droning fear, which she tried to ignore stubbornly, continued to weigh on her shoulders, becoming more noticeable and palpable. Leda had started her adult life with a nightmare, almost touched the cursed fog, and then saw a man who may have been someone once exiled from her village. Those were bad omens. And Leda remembered each of them. The work was finished. The twins had been helping with the household chores all day long, but now they locked themselves in the room to prepare for the festivities. Leda looked uncertainly at her outfit. Current outfit. Clean clothes. Festive clothes. Get everything. I guess I'll go with a festive. Should I pick a different outfit? No. Veria was ready. She was sitting on the windowsill looking out the window. She was sad for some reason. Her thick, long locks cascaded down her back. Her rare, delicate beauty was natural, effortless. Leda couldn't help staring at her. Are you alright? She turned around, cast a quick glance at Leda, and tilted her head and smiled broadly. You're so beautiful. It really suits you. Thank you. No, really. It's a pity that you'll run away before the fun begins, as usual. Maria shook her head, as if clearing it. She jumped off the windowsill and walked towards her sister. She smiled, no longer sad, as she dived into an icy pool of her worries and emerged a different person. Don't be afraid. It's a beautiful day. I don't want you to rush home. She put her arms around Leda, holding her close, and caressed her hair with an almost maternal tenderness. I want you by my side. Some choices increased your tie points. High or low ties can change the plot dramatically. What should I say? I don't like noisy celebrations. I want that too. I mean, it's your birthday with your sister, so... The door opened, and their mother rushed into the room, as usual, without knocking. She was an incurable giggler, just like Varia. She was just short of 40 years old, but men and women still froze when she entered the room and turned their heads when she walked past. Their mother was beautiful, charming, bubbling with life. Girls, are you still here? The young ones are already gathering. The boys are building the bonfire. Maria laughed loudly, as if what had bothered her now was entirely forgotten. She took the doll that protected her in her sleep and brought it to her lips. She left a kiss on its prickly cheek. May the gods bless us. They definitely will, my darlings. Her mother gently touched Lada's shoulder. Sit down. I'll do your hair. Lada sat on the edge of the bed, letting her mother untie her hair. Are you going to take long? Maria couldn't wait to start dancing. You can go ahead. I'll catch up to you later. Don't take too long. They heard her running hurriedly down the stairs. Lada's mother took a comb and ran it through the roots to the ends of her hair. Every touch was gentle, almost weightless. I know you're worried. There are a lot of bad omens today. Don't be afraid. These dances are for the gods, not people. Even if you stumble, no one will judge you. Her mother's voice was quiet, melodic. The comb untangled Lada's tousled hair carefully, obeying her gentle, unhurried movements. The gods will keep silent if they don't like something, but people won't. Since when do you care about that? You've been hiding among the sheep for too long. You're 18 now. It's time to spread your wings. Mother kissed her on the forehead and pulled away to look at her work. Done. Lada looked in the mirror. I liked what I had before, dammit. Braid, tied, plaited. Why are you gonna change also the color? How'd she do that? It's witchcraft! The gods did it! You know what? I'm just gonna go with what I had. You're literally changing, like literally my hair color and everything. It's tilting. What do you think? It's beautiful. Thank you. Then run quickly. Tonight belongs to you and the gods. Her mother stretched out her hand, and Lada turned her cheek into her mother's palm, closing her eyes. I used to run away from people, but now I'm an adult. It's time for a change. The fiery tentacles of the bonfire soared up, trying to reach the stars. The red light was reflected on the faces of the young people around it, sitting on the ground. Bawdy songs and wild cheers pierced the night. The mead flowed, and many faces were flushed from drinking. The young women were laughing. Lada froze hesitantly, glancing at the wooden idol sunk into the ground. She suddenly regretted wearing Dragan's gift. Was it a good idea to dress up like that? Varia was sitting by the fire, surrounded by friends. She was clutching a mug of mead in her hands. Dragan was sitting to her left. He glanced at the newcomer, but only fleetingly. His attention turned back to Varia almost instantly. He leaned over to her and said something, smiling. She threw back her head and laughed, not hiding her happiness from the gods. Lada was in no hurry to approach them, but Varia soon noticed her. She handed her mug to Dragan and rushed to her sister, deftly and gracefully, jumping over the other people's outstretched legs. Sister! Her embrace felt tight enough to crush her. They almost fell to the ground. "You're here at last, come on." Maria gripped her sister's hand and led her to the place where she'd been sitting. Dragan was no longer smiling. He was looking at the fire and didn't seem to be paying attention to Leda. Leda sat down between Varia and her friend Tata. "Welcome." Tata smiled broadly, looking into her eyes, but Leda knew that her smile was fake. Her eyes never laughed. Tata was always friendly to everyone around her, but there was no life in her. She was like a doll that lifts the corners of its mouth, not understanding what it means to smile for real. Her eyes were silent, empty, and they only lit up when she spoke to Varia. Tata did not smile at Varia, but there was an openness in it that did not show to other people. "What should I do?" Greet her warmly. "Thank you. You look like you're having fun." "Of course. The dancing will start soon." "Leda." "Tata's pleased that you're being friendly." "Leda. Look what a wonderful gift Dragan prepared for me." Maria took the scarf off of her neck and held out her open hands to her sister, showing the neatly folded red cloth. "It's gorgeous, isn't it?" She pressed it to her heart and then tied it around her neck again. "I'll never take it off." Dragan kept staring at the fire, clenching his jaw from time to time. He didn't look flattered. "What did Dragan give you?" She turned to him, grabbing his forearm possessively. "You promised me yesterday that you would give her something." Wow, way to make me feel special. So, that's what this was about. It was about Varia asked, could he have made such a pendant in just one night? Leda touched the pendant unconsciously. "Oh, good heavens, where did you get that beauty?" Varia looked at Dragan. Her voice became quiet as if she were astonished. "Is that your gift?" He looked at the pendant with undisguised irritation, as if he didn't think Leda would dare to wear it. "I guess so." What's that supposed to mean? Didn't he know what he was giving me? She wanted to rip it off her neck and throw it in his face, but Tata's words calmed her down. "It looks great on you. Dragan can be generous." "Yep." He took a sip of his drink, washing down the bitterness in his answer. Varia clasped her sister's hands. "You know, I can't. These people, they... Really hard loving them." "Tata is right. It matches your eyes." Dragan choked, wiped the mead off his mouth, and hurried to justify himself. "It's not true. Let's stop talking about this." Leda looked at his profile, which was only half illuminated by the fire. What was going on inside of his head? Why did he dislike her so much? And why, damn the gods, why had she put on the pendant? To spite him, or on the contrary, to show him how the stone brought out her eyes? Rhea grew quiet again. "You'd like to figure out Dragan, would I, though?" Gradually, everyone got drunk. Time passed slowly, lazily, as if the gods were trying to prolong the night. At long last, the Magus joined the celebration. Ignoring the crowd's enthusiastic screams, he headed towards the cushions set out for him. They were spread out on the ground so that he could comfortably watch the festivities. Ozar. The Magus' chest bore the mark of the gods he'd been born with. Ozar was the only one who could hear their dying breath and talk to them, and therefore he was sacred to the villagers. He sat down on the cushions and, spreading his arms wide, shouted, "Blas, play for us." "As you wish, blessed one." Blas, one of the villagers, sat down at the tympanum. He paused, gathering his thoughts, and then began playing skillfully, hitting the leather membrane with his hands. A deep rumble rippled through the air, filling the space with infernal vibration. It was so powerful, as if Velis himself was calling to the heavens in his menacing voice. Maria jumped up, dragging her sister and friend with her. God of trade and wealth who reigns in the underworld, he is the patron god of the Magi. Come on, hurry up! Tata let out a loud, ringing laugh. She was a dancer at all the rituals and celebrations and was happy to demonstrate her skills. Leda allowed herself to be drawn into a whirlpool of dancing bodies. Everyone went wild. They awoke from their drunken stupor and plunged into an ecstatic prayer. Every dancing movement was full of grace and raw energy. Slowly at first, then more and more expressively, trying to keep up with the increasing rhythm of the tympanum. They expressed their reverence for nature and the gods. They rose their arms to the sky and then dropped them back down, touching the ground with the tips of their fingers. Maria and Tata were dancing energetically, lost in the music. Despite her shyness and embarrassment, Leda joined them. Her clumsy legs and arms got in the way of the others and only made her more nervous. But Leda, for 76 diamonds, overcome it. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and lifted her head so the wind could cool her flushed cheeks. I practice every day. It's not like the sheep who should see my dancing. Let the gods watch too. This dance is for them, not for the people. She listened to the rhythmic sound of the drums and tried to get lost in it. She tried not to think about what she was doing, how she was doing it, and instead allowed her body to follow the call of the song instinctively. And all of a sudden she stopped tripping over her own feet. Her shoulders relaxed, her arms, once stiff and clumsy, encircled her waist in soft waves, and then soared into the sky gracefully. Blooming in the fiery night dusk under the stars that witnessed her triumph, Leda felt as if she were becoming one with nature. That connection twined and grew like coils of vine clinging to the unattainable. One that ties. Her every movement was inspired by the breath of elements, embodying the spirit of earth, air, and water. Leda spun and spun like a whirlwind, a real storm that could sweep away anyone who happened to be captivated by its madness. She called out to the gods, she asked, she demanded. The cold of the night, the fire of her heart merged into one, completing the endless cycle of life and death, blessing and punishment. She danced with her eyes closed, unaware that she was being watched. 2 eyes were closely observing her, trying to pick out only her body, her face, the waves of her arms among the swirling, excited mass of people. So Dragan, ? Dragan was looking at her, disarmed by her dance. Usually, inept, clumsy, reserved Leda seemed to have exposed herself to him or to the gods. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. Why was she doing that? Why was she working that magic? Why was she tormenting him? He forced himself to turn away and felt a terrible pang in his heart. That witch. She infuriated him, irritated him, exacerbated him. There was no need to react to that like a bull to a red flag. There was no need to fly into the scorching flames. He looked around for other women, focused on someone else's hair, someone else's smile, someone else's impersonal dancing, and his heart filled with hatred began to calm down. Dragan was waiting for Leda to finally go home and stop torturing him. You've disturbed the I was trying to read that. Oh, now it's... But there was also someone else watching her. The Ozar got her. Ozar hadn't noticed her before. Of course, her face was familiar to him, but there was nothing special about it, nothing interesting. Leda had always seemed too indifferent, too aloof, too prim and proper. He couldn't lead her into a dark corner, whispering sweet nothings in her ear. She wouldn't come with him and fall at his feet. But there was no disobedience in her either, nothing predatory or defiant. Leda was neither submissive nor rebellious. She was like a river flowing around a lake, not wanting to be part of anything else. Ozark tilted his head and spoke to his friend without taking his eyes off of her. Who is that? Shepherd's daughter. What's her name? Do you like her? Her name... Leda, as I recall. Ozark was silent, watching Leda's dancing. He stroked the corner of the pillow thoughtfully, lost in his thoughts. I haven't seen her dance before. You can talk to her. He chuckled. No. Why wouldn't he do that? Or why would he do that? He still wasn't interested in Leda. But he was staring at you. Young men and women danced around, shouting prayers, piercing the air with their joy. Leda's body was hot, lost in the dance, melting against the heat of the flames. Bright flashes gleamed in her eyes every time she looked at the bonfire. That was why she didn't notice that Tata had almost stopped dancing and was looking at her, serious and bewildered. Now let me guess, Tata's a love interest too? Dancing was all that saved Tata's lonely, broken heart. She particularly admired the female body, its curves and flexibility. She liked to look in the mirror and watch her flesh obey her movements. And now she was inspired by Leda's newfound vigor, as if doused by the bucket of cold water. Tata looked at her hips, her arms, her exposed neck, and wondered how she hadn't noticed it before. Leda could become a dancer. She could charm anyone. If only she knew how beautiful she was when she thought no one was looking. Impressed Tata. I think I've impressed everyone at this party. Leda stopped, trying to catch her breath. Her dress clung to her body, every gust of wind sent goosebumps over her skin, damp with sweat. Leda didn't look at the others and stepped aside to take a little rest. She was starting to enjoy the evening. It was time to choose the young woman who would be dressed in white. The young men started yelling out names, and the women laughed and put themselves forward. Why don't you join them? Leda raised her head, greeting her friend with a smile. Why don't you? Instead of answering, he sat down next to her and stretched out his tired legs. Your dancing was beautiful. Why didn't you join before? This is the first time I've managed to do it right. The Magus was looking at you. He's been watching you for a long time. Leda followed Milan's gaze and met Ozark's black eyes. He was sprawled on the cushions, his arms spread wide at his sides. Noticing that Leda was looking at him, he held her gaze. Get embarrassed, shrug indifferently, shrug annoyedly. Yeah, get embarrassed, why not? What's gotten into him? I don't know, I wanted to ask you. He's looking at you like he wants to eat you. Don't be ridiculous. Maria screamed with happiness, stretching out her arms to the sky as they dressed her in white. That night, she was going to be the one, the special one. Of course she was. Leda looked at the Magus once again, and almost flinched when she realized that he was still staring at her. Even now, when all of his attention was supposed to be focused on Varia, the young woman who was to become the symbol of the night, he kept looking at Leda. She shook her head as if dismissing his silent conversation. Maybe he had a vision about me, but what was it about? She didn't immediately notice that Milan was wringing his hands nervously. He always did that when he wanted to tell her something but didn't dare. What is it? What? Tell me already. I think I'm in love? He smiled, a sincere, somewhat sleepy smile, as if he were feeling dizzy. In love? She forced her face not to grimace. With whom? Her parents are against our union. She asked me not to tell anyone. I won't tell anyone, alright. But you'll share your secret with me, right? The main thing is that you're happy. The main thing is you're happy. He beamed. We are! Loss was drunk on mead. Having left the tiampan to the other musicians, he staggered his way through the celebrants. He put his hands to his mouth and screamed, "Hey, no one's girl, dance for us!" No one's girl. Varia had been laughing a moment before, but her expression immediately grew as dark as a thundercloud. She stormed through the crowd and shoved Loss in the chest. "May Chernenbog devour you for your dirty mouth." "Come on, what did I say? The gods know it's true." "You'd better worship instead of getting drunk. Look at yourself. You won't stop until you drink every drop of it." Tata tried to calm Varia down. "It's alright, don't listen to him. He's drunk." "I'm drunk, but you're not, so dance!" Varia made a quiet but threatening sound, something between a growl and a curse ready to hit him. But Dragan caught her swinging hand and gently pulled her aside. "That's enough. Want my fist in your face, Vloss?" "Maybe I do. Whoever draws the first blood will get Perun's blessing." "That can be arranged. Perun is the highest god of the Pantheon, the god of thunder and lightning." "That's enough." Eris stood between Dragan and Vloss. "I'll dance if you play." "I will be honored." Leda didn't even notice how she had jumped up watching their exchange. Milan tugged at her arm gently to make her sit back down. Varia is always getting into fights, and Dragan is always protecting her. Vloss returned to his drums. Varia was wearing a flower crown. She was supposed to dance with Tata. They began dancing around the bonfire slowly at first, and then faster and faster until they ran as if they were being chased by Chernobog himself. Wild and elegant, like frightened deer crossing a field, there was a struggle for life in their movements. It was surprising that they could move like ordinary people rather than being constantly immersed in the chaotic frenzy of the ritual dance. Suddenly, Verenia stopped, staring out intensely into the distance where the warm flames couldn't reach. Leda tried to figure out what had distracted her sister, but she saw nothing apart from the barely discernible fog. What's up with her tonight? I wish I knew. But the vision vanished, and Varia sprinted after Tata again. They shook their heads, tapping their feet in time with the music as if they were possessed. I'm worried. Firelight outlined the silhouette of Vloss's serious, sobered-up face. The flickering light bounced off the vibrating instrument. The musician's wrists hit the tympanum hard enough to cause an echo in the very depths of the earth, asserting their power. The monotonous, incessant blows lulled everyone into a trance, drawing them to the cave of incoherent images, mirages, ecstasy. The music increased in tempo. The last, most powerful blows left their ears ringing like lightning, rippling through the darkness. Vloss lowered his exhausted hands, reached for his mug, and finished the mead. Sweat streamed down his face, and his chest was heaving. He drank and looked at Tata, who froze, looking at him just as tired and breathing just as hard. Tata tossed back her fiery curls and walked away from the dancers. I think he really offended her. I will go comfort her. Varia hasn't noticed that Tata's gone yet. I don't want her to get upset. You think too much about Varia's feelings. Leave me alone. Leda stuck her tongue out at him and looked around for Tata. She was sitting on a swing hanging from a tree branch. Leda approached her, walking carefully, trying not to scare or drive her away. May I join you? Of course. Ada smiled with a sharp and quick movement of her lips, so forced that she couldn't help but realize it. She tried to make up for it and asked more sincerely, "How do you like our dance?" The gods surely couldn't help but appreciate it. She nodded with satisfaction. She touched her chest, her fingers were still shaking. She couldn't stop dancing until Bloss stopped playing. She was tired, but she didn't want to show it. "Don't pay attention to Bloss." She looked at Lada with unexpected anger. "I don't need your pity. You ought to pity yourself." Lada smiled wryly at how to recoil to such a vicious indifference. "May I ask why?" "You don't know how to do anything." Really loving these people. Dada wanted to bite her tongue, but her wounded pride and burning resentment burst out like poison, which stung her as well. "So be it, but you have nothing to do with it." "So you don't care?" "I'm trying to be helpful." "That's not what I'm talking about. Don't you care what others think of you?" "I don't know what they think of me, and I don't care." She pushed herself on the swing irritably, the ropes creaking as they tightened on the thick branch. "Nonsense. You do care, otherwise you wouldn't avoid people." "Maybe I just avoid people because I don't like them." "Then why don't you avoid them?" She wanted to say something, but the words got lost on the tip of her tongue. She began swinging back and forth, pulling Lada along with her. She was looking at her profile with interest. Tata was a beautiful, gentle face. Her eyes always looked a little frightened. She was gorgeous even when she was frowning or grimacing, but the magic of her looks was only revealed in dancing. Her red hair looked like flames soaring into the sky and falling back down like springs. Her small but firm breasts rose and fell from jumping, and her collarbones were about to burst through her delicate, milky skin. Leda had never talked to Tata for so long, but she'd always watched her dancing, almost secretly. No one could do it better than her. Lada caught herself thinking that she liked how blunt Tata was. And even though she had taken off her mask only a few inches, Lada could see the real her. "You danced well tonight." She spoke while pouting slightly, and therefore her words sounded like a reproach. "Thank you." "Makosh didn't give you talent, but if you tried hard, you could become a dancer." "You really think so?" Makosh is the dog goddess of fertility, mistress of the darkness. She spins people's destinies. "Of course." Is she wearing a mask again? Which of her words are true and which are a sweet lie? Had a frown staring at the crowd. "Maria's crying." Her sister was next to Dragan. "You won me dead." "Don't speak of what you don't know." They were arguing about something. Dragan tried to hold her back, but Maria broke free and ran away. "I'll go after her." "Give her a hug for me." But Lada ignored her words. Really want to read that writing there on the totem pole. Maria was hugging a wooden idol, whispering something. Her eyes were closed. Tears were rolling down her cheeks. What should I do? Wipe away her tears. Leda gently wiped the traces of Maria's sadness from her cheek. What happened between you two? Maria turned away from her sister. You're lucky. I'm even jealous. Of what? You accepted the world as it is. You don't get angry at other people's feelings. You don't look for qualities in people that they don't have. And you don't even think about what impression you make. You want to be useful, not needed. Isn't that the same thing? Yeah, I agree with that. No, not at all. You make it sound like it's a good thing. Her eyes brimmed with tears again. She shook her head, finding them back. I love you, Leda. Maria hugged her sister, burying her wet cheeks in her hair. Leda felt lost. She didn't understand what was bothering Maria. She didn't know what to say to calm her down and end the conversation as soon as possible. You're my twin, my sister. There is no one closer to me than you. What should I say? That's right. Varia took her hands and whispered anxiously and solemnly like an oath. I will never, ever leave you. Do you believe me? What's gotten into her? What worried her so much? Of course I do. Varia laughed through her tears and hugged her sister. It's kind of a bad day, isn't it? Did you also see... Varia squeezed her neck so hard that Leda wheezed, gasping for air. Hush. I don't want to talk about anything bad anymore. The drums thundered again, inviting everyone for a round of dance. Let's go. The celebration is almost over. Varia led her sister to the others, not giving her a chance to ask any more questions. Young men and women danced around the fire as the flames rose up, swaying above their heads. Varia held out her hand with a smile. Holding hands, they joined the stream. Their steps hit the ground with great force, like the blows from a hammer, and then rose again to step to the side. Round and round they danced around the flames, an eternal, ever-renewing, round dance. The sounds of ancient instruments seeped under their skin, squeezed their hearts, adjusting their beating to the rhythm. They were the wind, the quiet lake, the burning candle. Their faces were illuminated by the moonlight, reflecting the gleams of the gods' attentive gaze. Leda laughed loudly as if in a fever, but her laughter was drowned out by the screams of others. Obeying Tata's voice, the round dance switched to the opposite direction. She led them, set the pace. Leda felt dizzy, stopped paying attention to people's faces. She only saw the light of the fire, serene, primal, like a fever before death. Their celebration was intoxicating, maddening. When Leda finally opened her eyes and looked around, someone else's fingers were clutching her hand. Startled out of her reverie, she broke free and backed away, looking around. Varia? Her sister was nowhere to be seen. Varia! Leda was looking around, sweeping the crowd without lingering on their faces. No one was looking at her, lost in the labyrinth of madness. Where is she? Pressing her hand to her chest, she tried to calm her ragged breathing. This is enough for today. Backing away again, she turned around and rushed home. The door creaked loudly. Leda entered the hall quietly and called in a low, cautious voice, trying to find a familiar figure in the dark. Varia! But no one answered, and then she went upstairs, jumping over several steps at a time. Varia's bed was empty. She wasn't home. So, she's still out there. She's probably having fun with some guy, had too much mead, may have lost herself in a dance, must be crying near the idol. How is probably having fun with some guy the same as must be crying near the idol? May have lost herself to the dance. I'm gonna go with crying near the idol. Probably never got resolved. Leda went to the window and raised her eyes to the sky. She once again remembered her dream. The night is almost over. By morning this dread will be gone. Dim stars sailed through the darkness, making their way to the other worlds, but Leda knew that they would not be able to reach them. That time tomorrow, they would return to their place. Leda's whole body shuddered. A lone star was falling across the sky, slowly but steadily. Its light, which once seemed so bright and unwavering, was now fading. Like a cry of a farewell in the silent darkness, calling for help, but hearing no answer. A lost voice in the boundless space. A soul is falling. She said it out loud. Her heart responded, trembling in her chest. She suddenly felt cold. Her head seemed to be squeezed in a vice, not letting in any thought except someone died. She rushed out of the room, ran downstairs and outside. The village was empty, lifeless. Emboldened, the fog had burst its banks like a flooding river and was now wandering through the streets. Varia! Leda felt hysterical. Maria! Stubborn fog concealed the horizon. The outlines of the houses and trees became clear only when Leda came very close to them. She rushed from street to street looking in the courtyards and listened to the somber silence. And then she saw something that hadn't taken shape yet. Something that was lying on the ground like a pile of snow that hadn't melted. Leda approached it slowly. I'm going to assume her sister is dead. Maria lay motionless, deathly pale, frozen, like a wax statue. The haze stretched out as if it wanted to engulf her, but retreated as soon as Leda approached. Maria. Her sister in white dress. She was dead. I'll give you a 5. Alright, so Haze is 2, reality is 0, 3 to tie, stubbornness 0, compassion 6, diamonds. Curse you for not giving me spare diamonds. So it looks like they also released a chapter 2, or may I say episode 2. Yeah, I'll get to that as soon as humanly possible. There's so much work when Romance Club updates. So much work. And I try and get to it as soon as possible. Because I also want to try and use the diamonds, but then I also watch the ads, and then, you know, all this other stuff, so, yeah. So I try and take care of all that. Excuse me. So, the new book is very interesting to me. You know, as a person who has played God of War, and done a lot of Viking / Norse mythology, it's kind of interesting and whatnot. There's also a lot of things referenced in so far that aren't typically referenced in a lot of those games and a lot of other things. So it's really, really interesting. I want to see where it goes. And, you know, all involving the story. Yeah, no, I don't know what else to say. Leave a comment down below, letting me know what your thoughts of episode 1 so far, and if you're looking forward to new episodes. And if you are, and you aren't subscribed yet, consider subscribing. Other than that, thanks again for watching. Love your beautiful faces, and I'll catch you on the next video. Peace out.